The Syrian civil war is heating up again, but most of the information about it is like 8 years out of date, and a lot has changed since then. So, this video aims to be a simple guide into understanding who the Syrian rebels are in 2024. Every Syrian rebel group, at its core, is opposed to the regime of Bashar al-Assad. That's literally what makes them rebels. But if you dig deeper than that, there are three main umbrella rebel groups. These two are what most would describe as the Syrian opposition, the continuation of the original rebellion against the Assad regime that began way back in 2011. As of the writing of this video, they're working together to fight the greater evil in their eyes that is the Assad regime, but they have completely different visions for how Syria should be. The first is the Syrian National Army, often abbreviated as the SNA. The SNA is armed, trained, and supported heavily by Turkey. Many of them are secular. Many of them believe in some sort of democratic state after Assad. But most importantly, and across all factions in this group, they hate Assad. They want to see just about anybody else run the country except Assad. Their connections to Turkey are crucial and important. Turkey supports them in a myriad of ways. Weapons, supplies, organization, intelligence, you name it. Much of their political organization is even exiled in Istanbul. For a long time, they've held territory directly on the border of Turkey, backed up directly by actual Turkish boots on the ground. The second main opposition group is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, commonly abbreviated as HTS. They are an Islamist faction that primarily operates out of the city of Idlib in the far northwest. They're a merger of lots of different Islamist factions that used to operate independently in northwest Syria, most notably the al-Nusra Front, but also including, at first, branches of al-Qaeda, though they've since distanced themselves from them. This is where it gets a bit weird though. HTS has been designated as a terrorist organization by the US, UN, EU, and even Turkey, but despite this, has received varying levels of support from Turkey. Back in 2017, the various Islamist jihadi movements were struggling with infighting and recognized that to pragmatically win the Syrian civil war and defeat Assad, they needed to form a unified organization that acts more as a united military wing and less like an ideological purity test. Despite presenting a more moderate image nowadays, HTS is still built on very conservative religious foundations. That pragmatism allowed them to also work with Turkey and with the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army, despite them still labeling HTS as a terrorist organization. Both of these groups have conducted an offensive against Assad's regime in northern Syria. Both liberated the Aleppo region. Both of these groups also operate under a unified military command structure that is overseen and organized by Turkey. That's how they've managed to function as a seemingly unified rebel army as of early December 2024. Though, for the assaults on Aleppo and Hama, HTS seems to be the senior partner. In addition to being at war with Assad, they're at war with Assad's allies: Russia, Iran, Iranian-supported militias, and some other major groups like Hezbollah. A massive part of the reason that the war has heated up again is because Assad's allies are weak, and he relied a lot on their support. Russia is involved in a brutal war in Ukraine and can't help Assad as much as they used to. Hezbollah has been completely defanged by Israel. The Assad regime used Hezbollah fighters extensively early on in the Syrian civil war, but right now it isn't possible. There are also major Iranian militias on the ground in Syria who help the Assad regime, but they've been heavily weakened by airstrikes from Israel and from the United States. The third major rebel group in Syria is the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF. Sometimes this group is confusing, because they're not part of the so-called Syrian opposition, and this is for a few reasons. The first is that the SDF is primarily led by the Kurdish ethnic group, and has strong links to Kurdish nationalism. Turkey doesn't like this. They have their own problems with Kurdish separatist groups in southeastern Turkey, and the SDF has strong links to these groups. As a result, Turkey doesn't like the SDF. The second reason is because they've made deals with the Assad regime before. Turkey and the SNA invaded SDF-controlled areas of Syria in 2019. The SDF made a deal with the Assad regime to let their troops into their territory to help defend against this invasion. In many respects, the SNA and their Turkish backers are far more serious of a threat to the SDF than the Assad regime, which is why they have worked with them. This isn't because they like the Assad regime, rather, it's just a lesser of two evils. The SDF is backed by the United States and the UK, but it's awkward because Turkey is a NATO member and ally of these two countries, and they've at times disagreed about the situation in Syria. This might also change during the Trump administration, but we'll have to wait and see. A question you might have now is, do these relate to ISIS, the Islamic State? All of these groups are against and have fought against the Islamic State to some extent. The SDF was one of the primary ones who retook most of the ISIS territory when they got big almost a decade ago. ISIS still operates a bit in the Syrian desert, and sometimes makes an occasional attack, but they're nothing like they used to be. Okay, so, there are some oversimplifications in this video, but I still hope it gives you an updated, concise overview of the major factions involved in Syria right now. If you like this conciseness, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks. Syria is a complicated conflict. Make sure to do way more research beyond this video if you really deeply want to understand.